Warning. This ritual should only be attempted by those of whom have a reasonable level of culinary expertise and experience hosting company. The minutiae of the instructions are incredibly important. As with any dinner party, a good host invites their guests to share their home. All the same principles of hospitality are similar to appropriate hosting standards, with one caveat. While you host this party, your home belongs to the guests. It is not your own. That being said, it's very important that no one enters your home once the ritual has begun, as it could catastrophically alter the host dynamic of this ritual. About this ritual. For the purposes of this ritual, the term ritualist and host are interchangeable. This ritual was conceived by 14th century master chef Guillaume Dier. The original details are not entirely clear, but rumors exist that the formulae was not entirely of his own creation, but his was the first that resulted in some measure of success. Since inception, the ritual has been attempted throughout history, often with terrible results, most notably the Feast of Fools of 1430, which led to the attempted dissolving of the holiday by the Council of Basel the following year. The guests are not typical beings and must be treated with a heightened sense of respect. There are two major facets that compose this ritual: culinary and hospitality, as well as etiquette. It appears as though none of these are restricted by time or cultural influences and may be subjective to the ritualist. The goal. If every guest is satisfied and leaves of their own volition content, you may ask for a favor. The last question from one guest. As with many Faustian bargains, you may ask for wealth, power, or any typical worldly desire, but you must direct the question to the appropriate individual, and the request must be very specific. You will learn which guest is appropriate for which type of favor throughout the night, as you learn more about them, as any good host would. The guests are also known to be very fickle, so a great deal of importance is stressed on being clear and humble. The magnitude of your request must parallel the perceived success of your dinner party. For example, if you know you barely managed to survive, requesting a loved one to be returned from death would be offensive. It's important to study these rules and stipulations, as once the meal has been served, the guests will arrive, and it would be very rude as a host to direct your attention away from your guests by checking the guidelines. Culinary formula. 5 dishes must be prepared, all in single servings, and served in separate spots around 2 tables. There are small discretionary choices available to the ritualist, but they must follow the guidelines strictly. 1 dish will be served for each of the 4 guests, and 1 final dish for the ritualist. Dish 1. There's a discrepancy between which choice works most efficiently, but both are known to serve true to function. Option 1. A dish cooked from anything that has been killed by the ritualist, but must be something the ritualists themselves would eat. See the good host rule. Option 2. A plethora of clean, raw vegetables that are endemic to the region, preferably harvested by the ritualist. Dish 2. The finest cut of meat that the ritual is able to afford, bovine tenderloin, is known to work well. In the account that the ritualist is a hunter, it's better to use a prize game of their own victory. The meat must not be fish, but may be poultry, beef, pork, or game. This dish should be served with potatoes or rice and bread. Gravy and/or sauces are not mandatory, but are rumored to be appreciated. Source is needed. Dish free. Perhaps the easiest dish to accommodate. Dish free must not be cooked by the ritualist. It must be cheaply obtained, a large quantity, lower in quality, and very calorically dense. Modern options have proven easily accessible. McDonald's or other such fast food appears to be an excellent choice. Dish 4. Similar to Dish 1, there are 2 main options available for your 4th guest. Option 1. Anything that may cause severe bodily harm or death to the ritualist if consumed, but must be organic in nature. If the ritualist has any severe allergies, those may prove to be an excellent choice. Otherwise, the flesh of a poisonous creature, such as frogs or the pufferfish, or copious amounts of poisonous produce, typically fungi, serve well. The amount must be sufficient to kill the ritualist. Option 2. This option is in direct contrast to the previous choice. It must be milk as fresh as possible, no older than an hour and a half from the source. Human milk is acceptable. Dish 5. This dish must be something that the ritualist very much enjoys, yet has it frequently. Think of the responses you'd have if someone were to ask your favorite food. This dish must be appropriately enjoyed by the ritualist. It is recommended that it be a dish that the ritualists themselves has made on many occasions, and thus has very little likelihood of poor results. In one account, a host who had their own dish catered, not to their satisfaction, died of asphyxiation shortly after the meal was finished. The good host rule. All of these meals, aside from Dish 4, Option 1, must be made in a fashion that the ritualists themselves would eat. If the ritualist is a vegetarian or vegan, any meat or dairy must be served in a way that appears to be the most palatable or alluring to them. Hospitality formula. 2 tables must be used in the performance of this ritual. 1 large table with ample room for 4 guests to eat, enough place settings, drinking glasses, etc. This table should ideally be square or round, so that the guests are able to see each other and the host without turning their bodies. This is known as the line of sight rule. If any other table is used, no one guest must be at the head or foot of the table. If a guest is at the head, another must be at the foot, keeping in mind the line of sight rule. The second table must be a smaller, personal-sized table. It may be large enough to accommodate multiple guests, but must be smaller than the guest table and only host one place setting. The two tables must never touch. This will be the ritualist's table. The separation is important. You may think of this distinction as though you were a servant, permitted to dine with your masters. A typical formal layout of a one-course meal appropriate to the ritualist culture must be set up, including, but not exclusively, fork and knife, water glass, wine glass, placemat or charger, candles appropriate to table size, serviettes or napkins, water carafe, and wine carafe. In the event that a guest should run out of water or wine, it's appropriate for the host to fill their glass, although not mandatory, as the guests may pour for themselves. The carafes must never run out. If they appear to be low, the host must promptly refill them. The wine provided must be something the host would drink, alcohol-free if the host abstains from alcohol, or another type of beverage, such as cider or juice. Once the guests arrive, the ritualist has become the host and must follow certain hospitality guidelines, regardless of culture. 1. Never touch a guest without their permission. Never has permission been given, so far as anyone knows. 2. Never touch the belongings of a guest. This includes their place setting a meal once served. Their cup must not be touched if being filled by the host. 3. Never directly address a single guest. Questions or conversations must organically find themselves directed at a guest. If they were talking and you inquired about the subject, there is one exception to this rule. That is the final question. 4. Never address a guest by name or provide any sort of nickname. Even if you think you know their name, you don't. They are both non-denominational and connected in some way to all systems of theology. 5. Never let the carafes run dry. 6. Never let a candle burn down entirely. 7. Above all else, never reveal your name to your guests. A title such as chef, doctor, political or military position may be provided if it comes up organically. This includes nicknames and initials. 8. The final question must be directed to the appropriate guest. 9. The host must try their best to enjoy themselves. This may be the most difficult rule to adhere to, as this ritual can be very intense and stressful. But consider this: is any dinner party truly worth attending if the host is in shambles? Consequences. The extent of consequences for failed dinners or broken rules are not fully known. In fact, there is potential to improve or change the ritual itself, although deviation is strongly advised against. Such consequences have been noted. A host or ritualist who fails to enjoy their own dish may asphyxiate or die of toxic shock syndrome. A host or ritualist who fails to provide appropriate or satisfactory meals to their guests may suffer a particularly gruesome end, or in one case, lack thereof. See notable cases of failure. The fate met for an unsatisfactory meal is specific to the infringed upon host. A host or ritualist who fails to accommodate any particular hospitality rule may find themselves living an undesirable or so-called cursed life. Notable cases of success: Guillaume Thiers, Pont Admire, 1325. Unknown desire, possibly culinary prowess. A Russian peasant and self-proclaimed mystic, St. Petersburg, 1915. Desire is believed to be the lasting fame. Infamy? An abstract American artist, New York, circa 1959, desired simply to have a dinner party. Notable cases of failure. This list is difficult to properly determine, as much of the information based on failed rituals appears to be little more than rumors, often attributed to sacrilege, worship of demons. As such cases, the dissolution of the Knights Templar, insanity, or the works of political tyranny, the Great Leap Forward. It's rare that survivors exist, or are even capable and willing to discuss the events or their failures. It's also important to note that without understanding what it is the ritualist requested in the final question, it's impossible to know whether or not the ritual was a success.